It is an evolving space, the media space that we are working in. What are some of the nuances that are happening? And also, could you put in a view on what digitalization is doing on in terms of how persons with disabilities are represented in the media?
What I want to say is that the space is moving very fast. The digital space is moving very fast, making news spread like wildfire. And what happens is anything you report before you start correcting or before you start apologizing, it will have already hit very many views. So what are we saying? What we are saying is that how deliberate are we going to be when we are doing reporting on persons with disabilities? What type of role modeling are we going to put out there? Because if we do positive role modeling, then what happens is that within a very short time, the public, through digital space, will have had an opportunity to interact and know exactly what persons with disabilities are doing and how their life is and how their experiences are. Because if we don't do that, then in a very short time, again, if you are putting out negative stories because of how fast news travel, because it's not the era where you will have a news item, then you have to walk all the way, media houses walk out all the way to the media house so that your story can be queued for either the 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock news. It happens everyone has become a media person, or everyone has become a news person because you can share using the social media platforms. Your phone the phone has transcended just not being a communication device, but now it's actually a broadcasting device. So that means that we should be careful. We should have what I call be intentional on what type of news you're trying to pass around when you're actually focusing on persons with disability, because it actually impacts on how the public, the policymakers, the government, and the corporate will actually partake or will view persons with disabilities.
Talking about disability, I want to look at it more from the perspective of the role of the media in disability inclusion. Permit me go back memory lane. In 1787, when British conservative parliamentarian Edmund Burke said the media was the fourth arm of government or fourth pillar of administration, that's after the executive, judiciary, and parliament, people actually thought that he was joking. Today, in modern political science studies, the media is referred to as a fourth arm of government. In media studies, we call it the fourth estate. It tells you how powerful it is, and there can be no gainsay that the media has always and continues to play pivotal role in how change comes about. Let's go back about 50 years ago when women emancipation just took central stage. The media was at the apex of this, and today we have the results. 100 years ago, women were not voting even in the UK. The media played a very pivotal role, and today that change has come. Now, connecting the dot, talking now context-wise about the situation of persons with disabilities vis-a-vis the media, I want to say that the media has advertently or inadvertently kept out persons with disabilities in the way they go about their coverage. I will talk about Cameroon, for instance, where I come from. Last year at this very conference, I shared my experience. I was sent out by a lecturer during my first lecture as a journalism student when I went to acquire my bachelor's degree in journalism. But thank God for my steadfastness. Today in Cameroon, the media hardly want to talk about activities to fast-track disability inclusion. And that's one of the things that motivated me to become a human disability journalist. Now, they hardly make content accessible. They hardly include persons with disabilities in the media space. And good enough, we've started having journalists who are themselves persons with disabilities. I will say it now and I'll still say it tomorrow. No one can tell your story better than yourself. So as journalists with disabilities, we need to take the front seat. We need to dictate the pace as to how we want the world to know about us. Failure to do so, we may only start singing a song that will never be listened to. And I want to crave the indulgence of civil society organizations, governments, to ensure that they give journalists with disabilities that space. They accommodate them to be able to do their work, and in that way, we can change the narrative of persons with disabilities. Because for now, persons with disabilities and the media are facing a conflict, that of having access to information. In fact, I see it better for many people to have access to quality information than for a few individuals to control resources.
In terms of accessibility, well, I pioneered a platform where persons with disability sort of do some form of self-help to help one another use the technology they have much more effectively and to learn about or be aware of new ones. So the question this afternoon is about the changing, the digitalization of the media space and how it is having effect, or what effect it's having on the disability community, and indeed how it is portrayed or perceived by the rest of the society. Well, the two previous speakers have spoken extensively. Well, I just want to also add to that to say that with the digitalization of the media, it's happening at a very neck-breaking speed. And the effect of that is that fake news can spread just as well as positive news can spread. But more importantly, it is creating avenues for persons with disability to also tell their stories. I'm seeing a lot of persons with disability who either have their own blogs or are using social media to convey information about themselves and indeed the disability community as a whole. But the problem now is, on a larger scale, how far or how impactful are those messages? The disability community is still viewed oftentimes in the African continent from a perspective of heroism. In other words, people who do something that everyone does, but because they are persons with disability are viewed as doing something heroic. At other times, the stories are told from a point of charity, help them and offer them assistance. And at other points, the stories are also told by journalists who are not very vast and well equipped about disability rights and issues. So the slant, the way they report the stories, rather than pushing forward the disability conversation and helping to change the narrative, sometimes compounds issues. The digitalization of the media is in fact a positive development, but there's a long way for us as persons with disability in terms of how we leverage it for the positive stories that we want to tell and for the impact we want to make in terms of changing people's attitudes and erasing the stereotypes that have long held us back.
If I can weigh in on what the three panelists have said, something that's very come out clearly is that digital spaces are providing an opportunity for persons with disabilities to tell their own stories. But then my question to the panels now would be, for persons with disabilities, to some extent they have been segregated, and in terms of accessing education and in terms of accessing resources, and we've seen even some of the laws that would be passed in the country that would to some extent deny access to the internet and all these products that would allow persons with disabilities to tell their stories. How do we empower persons with disabilities to tell their stories? And I'll give a perfect example. You'd find most of the times that persons with disabilities ourselves, we do not know how to tell our stories. Then if there is an opportunity for us to tell our stories, how do we make sure that we empower ourselves and then we get to tell the impactful stories?
Earlier in the day, I was talking about a media space that I would like to see, which is one that gives persons with disabilities the opportunities to not just have their stories told, but be the drivers in the telling of these stories. when you take a cursory look at the media space in Africa and indeed across the world, and you ask yourself, or you do a proper survey and find out how many persons with disabilities are operating in the media space or have influence in terms of playing the roles of editors and producers, you probably find out that the number is still very small. The smallness of this number means that editors and producers who have little or no knowledge or no interest about disability, or who see disability from a wrong perspective, will continue to determine what stories go or how stories are told. So one of the ways I believe we can do this is that for the media needs to be deliberate in creating opportunities for persons with disabilities, not just to come into the space, but to be equipped with the right skills and knowledge. I see the need for a greater need for internships and mentorship of students who are studying communication in school. I see an avenue for media managers to say, we just like we want to reserve certain quota for certain groups of certain categories of persons, can we also do the same for persons with disability and help them grow along the line, and not just bring them into the space, but allow them to have a voice in shaping what makes the paper that you see the next morning, or the story you see online, or the TV reports you watch. But for us in the disability community too, I mean, we're not left out. We always say that there's nothing for us without us. Isn't that what we say? Many of us who are in the media, or maybe not many, the few, when you compare when you look at the larger number, we need to be more deliberate to say, we can create avenues to mentor young ones. We can create avenues to help them see that your study of communication should not just be, in Nigeria, let me just give you an example. In the past, people used to go to communication, to study mass communication, because in their opinion, it didn't require knowledge of mathematics. It wasn't necessarily because they wanted to, they understood what it entails and what career opportunities lie ahead. So sometimes you see people who graduate and are unable to find a job or unable to create an avenue for themselves. For those of us who are with disabilities in the media, this is an opportunity, this is a call on us to say we need to be deliberate in creating avenues for the people who are younger than us and coming behind us, to mentor them. And of course, the disability community as a whole, including persons with disabilities and organizations, we need to be more intentional about the kind of stories we tell. The media reports stories that are attractive. What the media sells, or media organizations sell, is news. If your event is not newsworthy, it will make the next morning's paper. So we need to be more strategic in the kind of events we organize, and where possible, forge collaborations. There's nothing that stops us from offering to train media houses on how to relate with and report disability issues.
The business of disability inclusion in the media does not go well with breaking news. It's not about just getting up one morning and choosing to go online and write what you think it is news. It is about investing on solution journalism-oriented stories, telling stories in an appealing manner. It's about following up with trends and ensuring that persons with disabilities are included. And I have been thinking and working out some strategies that the media can become a vital catalyst in fostering this drive for inclusion. And one way my organization feels that that is possible is by training persons with disabilities who are already journalists with the requisite skills on how to handle stories related to their issues. It's also by visiting journalism training institutions. It's by visiting media organs, discussing with them the prospects of having disability issues included in their programs, and for universities, having it included in the school or in the syllabus. This will help even the graduates to be able to incorporate the skills they would have garnered in their day-to-day activities. And above all, I am thinking of the possibility of having an event where I bring together these stakeholders I just spoke about, and we've already crafted a project proposal to that respect. And the only thing that is holding us back now is the funds to have this activity take off. Already we had a testing phase where we visited students of the University of Boyar's Journalism and Mass Communication. And let me tell you that they are so anxious to be part of telling stories about persons with disabilities and extending this empowerment to the wider world. I want to say here that we have gone past that age where we say that only people who have formal training in journalism and mass communication can become good journalists, can become good storytellers. I remember back in my training days, when I was acquiring training to become a journalist, I had a visiting lecturer from Zimbabwe who spoke about layered journalism. Layered journalism is a concept I am now incorporating in my journalism practice. It's about bringing together those who think that they are not experts, those who have very little about journalism, but who are passionate about telling stories, who are passionate about touching lives and changing the situation of persons with disabilities. You bring them up, you help them to come out with a story. For example, I am opting here now to edit stories or pieces, even opinion pieces, or solution journalism-based stories from anyone here who does not have a journalism background, so that together we can put hands on deck to ensure that the media, which have and continue to contribute a lot in different revolutions, can also be part of the disability inclusion agenda. It is only by bringing together all these stakeholders, doing what is right, and having persons with disabilities included in programs right from conception, so that they will not be passive in matters about them. Let's do this. And I'll tell you that in the next 5 years, when we sit here, we will not be thinking about having persons with disabilities to be part of this. But at that time, we would have been assessing what they have been able to do to fast track that disability inclusion through the media.
As an employer of persons with disabilities in the media space, one of the issues that I encountered when I started this is that I had very few people with disability who would actually take up the space of journalism. So what I did is I crafted a collaboration with the government and one civil society, and we were able to offer training, which was like a crash program on journalism. And what happened is, what we discovered was that from that, when I did my stock of the trainees, they discovered that the media is basically premised on 3 items: to inform, educate, and entertain. And the question was, are the persons with disabilities ready to occupy that space where they are able to inform, educate, and entertain? As my colleagues have said, that for the story to take up or to be featured in the next day's stories, because media sells news, and those news could be entertainment news, informational news, and also just educative news. So as persons with disabilities, what I would say is, how are you, or how are they able to fit in that space whereby they are crafting these news that are able to be sold the following day? Because a media house cannot survive if it's not getting advertising revenue, because it is that, and even if it is a situation whereby it's getting donor funding, then it reach a point, the donors are also saying, what is your sustainability model? So what I would say is that persons with disabilities in the space of journalism or in the space of crafting news that are supposed to be on the front page of a news item or a breaking news item, they should be able to craft this news in a manner that someone should not be able to see the difference of the news being done by a person with disabilities. And what I normally say is what has been happening all over and over again, and what my colleague from Nigeria has just said, the heroism reporting of persons with disabilities, whereby the same story of a woman in the village or a lady in the village going to the river to fetch water is a normal occurrence. But now when it comes to a lady with disability going to the river to fetch the same water, then when we are reporting it, we're reporting it as if it's a heroism issue. It's just daily living attribute. It's only that they are in the same environment, but one has disability. So what happens is that has put in a situation whereby when also journalists are covering these stories of persons with disabilities, then the response is, how did you cover that story, or how did you report that story? Then there is bashing of the journalists also that has happened. So to me, I would really appreciate if we have persons with disabilities themselves telling their stories and going out there to cover the three premises of media space, which is inform, educate, and entertain. I would love to have more of them coming up and occupying this space. They can be DJs, they can be musicians, they can, all these that we are saying, and this can happen, and it will all end up and take advantage of the digital space.
What opportunities are available for persons with disabilities to come into the media space? In Nigeria, it's a new president. Is the agenda of persons with disabilities big for the new president? And even if it's not necessarily with the new government, what opportunities are available for persons with disabilities in Nigeria to participate in media?
Well, while I will not sit here and tell you that I know firsthand what the agenda of the new president is with respect to disability, I will tell you that he's from a party that, if you look at their track record, they've sort of championed disability issues to a greater extent than the other major party in the country. It doesn't mean they've done excellently well, but compared to where we were before and where we are now, I would say they've done more. And I want to believe that he will improve on what has been inherited. Now, opportunities for persons with disabilities in the media. Well, like I said earlier, with the digitalization of the media and the fact that it's easier with the digitalization of the media, it becomes quite easier to start some form of platform or to use your existing platforms to tell your story. So, yes, more and more persons with disability can toe that path and start something. And more can even write and contribute to existing organizations. If it's well done, if it's well written and well researched, I'm sure many of the existing organizations will take it up. I also believe that in cases where media houses, a journalist has also reported a story in a light that doesn't reflect the disability community's interest in a proper way, there are opportunities for rejoinders, for feedback, letters to the editors, and some sort of things of that nature, if well done and done properly, and without abuse or insult, could be opportunities to, on one hand, portray the disability community in better light and change the narrative, and on the other hand, help the journalist and the media house learn from their mistake. Of course, Luke told you of the three major aspects of the media. There are a lot of things, and I'll tell you that I've seen a lot of blind people involved in the entertainment aspect of the media and related fields, and there's a lot more that can be done.
There are a lot of opportunities for persons with disabilities within the media space. Sometimes it is also because of the lack of will. we feel that because we are persons with disabilities, we wouldn't be accepted. That is already being defeated. And one of such opportunities that I will be recommending will be freelancing. We have news organizations which are very much open to freelancers. One of them, Minority Africa, where I happen to have done quite some work within the lane of reporting on disability issues. I mean, it's a news organization in Uganda that is incorporating a lot of disability inclusion, bringing solutions, journalism, and future to bring out the ability in disability. We have even here in Kenya, but no advertisement, please, who also are so open to freelancers. These are openings that persons with disabilities can leverage. These are organizations that some like Minority Africa even give fellowships, and persons with disabilities also take part in such trainings. I've participated in one of their fellowships, and they are good at what they do. So persons with disabilities need to take up these opportunities. They need to showcase their ability, and it is not considering them on the basis of pity or sympathy. It's recruiting them because you see them good enough, you see them qualified, and don't also accept to do something because you know that, okay, it is just for you to go and waste time. Remember that time is too precious to be wasted. Invest time where you know that you will end up having something to sustain yourself and your family. Good enough. So many persons with disabilities today are breadwinners in their families. So can you. So do not relent and don't see your disability as an obstacle, because when you do so, you are already defeated even before you start. And such a journey could only end in years. So we should be very conscious of what steps we take, and they should be tilted toward success and nothing else but success. Telling our own stories in an appealing manner and in a way that disability, the stereotypes surrounding disability would soon be a thing of the past.
Opportunities are out there, so it's upon persons with disabilities to go and grab them. Someone said opportunity waits for no one. So in the space of media also, I would like persons with disabilities to come out and tell their stories and grab that opportunity, because you have to be on the table for when the decisions are being made. You're also partaking those decisions.